The someone or someones in the woods. I joined Reddit today pretty much to tell this story, though I am a lurker on a ton of subreddits, so it's just nice to have an account now. I've told the story to my roommates, who are from the same town, and I've talked about it a few times with some of the people who were there, but that's it. I don't even like to talk about it, because inevitably, some will say, really? We should go try and find it again, and I really don't want to. I've looked for it on a map a few times, but I can't find it, though my male friend who drove there that night swears he has the directions memorized through Google's aerial maps. Anyways, I'm originally from a major city in southern Ohio, and outside of town, there are a number of smaller townships. One of these is known as the more country bumpkin redneck grit part of town. It's not even in the same county, but is part of the general area my city is though of as. In the woods, there's this legend of Hell's Church, supposedly an old church that burned down where Satanists do rituals now, or a Satanist church that burned down by a ritual depending on who you ask. There are a number of Hell's Church myths in Ohio, in many different places, but this one was closest to us, and a number of my guy friends decided they wanted to be ghost hunters and check out haunted places around where we lived. We were juniors in high school, and while all of us obviously thought this was just stupid bullshit, we thought it was funny to go out and scare ourselves. Plus, most people had cars or a driver's license by now, so we were enjoying a new burst of freedom. I'm a scaredy cat about most stuff like this, but I was the most tomboy-ish girl in the group, and always kind of wanted to be able to hang with the guys. Plus, some of the girls in the group, who I was closer to, were going so I didn't want to look like a loser or a pussy. So, one day in November, we decide we were going to go out one night and try to find this church. We had actually been to this location once before that fall, but one of my friends had a curfew, so after exploring an old barn and the railroad tracks on a bridge nearby, we left. We hadn't found the church, supposedly just the chimney at this point, to our disappointment and my mild relief. We took 2 cars out there, going past more populous parts of our city and back to this woodsy area. I can't honestly tell you how we got out there, but I know it's off a state highway, then an abandoned access road, past some old warehouse, and then down a dirt road. Once you get down this dirt road, there's kind of a thicker part of the road early on where we park cars off to the shoulder. We did this because the road thins out and becomes impossible to drive down, and also someone clearly owns this land, and later down the road there is some no trespassing signage. I'm sure a ton of kids come back here, so it didn't seem odd to me that they wanted to block this place off. I barely thought twice about it. At the time, we get out of our cars and start walking down the dirt road, wandering off the path from time to time to check out barns or clearings where we thought the chimney might be. At first, it was just scary because it was dark and old, or whatever, but then the barns started to get weirder. Like they were filled with weird spray painting symbols and bullshit like that. But that's not what bothered us. But also other stuff, like dead owls that looked like they'd been opened up, though they were dried out and decomposed by the time we got there, thank God. And other bits that looked like they might come from animals. I was grossed out. But we all kind of agreed that these probably came from the same teenagers trying to fake a satanic ritual, or that the animals got trapped in the falling apart barn and died in there. My friends are now hardcore trying to find this stupid chimney, so they keep taking off through the woods into the clearings. Myself and the other 2 girls were there kind of hang back on the tree line for most of them, getting a little more nervous and a little irritated with all the coming up empty. As we keep going, we find a bike on the tree line, like a bike that maybe a 12-year-old would ride. That's a little creepy, but fine, whatever. Probably belonged to someone that owned the land. We decided we were going to go a little further, and soon enough, we find we find another bike. This one is older, a little rusted but still undersized. We didn't talk too much about the other bike, just kind of mumbling that it's probably still nothing. One or two of the 4 guys who were there are kind of trying to tump it up, saying these kids probably got murdered or stuff like that, but no one is really having it at the point. By this point, we've been there for almost 2 hours, and it's getting really late. Plus, I think we were all a little more creeped out than we wanted to admit. We decide to head back to the cars, and I'm feeling relieved, happy to be headed back to my house and the fuck out of there. But things never work out that way, do they? By the cars, we see a road that goes straight up a hill through the trees. At the start of it, there was a big metal gate that had a road closed sign on it, which we had seen before, but for some reason, it had never occurred to us to try and go up the road. We had a small debate at the gate about an even-ish split on who wanted to venture up and who didn't. I absolutely didn't, but eventually, we decided we'll go up just to see. Both the drivers want to go, so there's not a lot we can do about it. We climb over the gate and start up the hill, where an old pavement road is cracked and crumbled under our feet, though it was for sure a real asphalt road at some point. In addition to the road condition and the brush being an obstacle, someone had felled a bunch of trees over the path, purposefully blocking off the road from any cars. Some of us are starting to seriously question if we should be doing this, arguing that someone obviously wanted to keep us out of here, but we get teased for being afraid and we keep going. I couldn't see where the road would end because it was so dark, and the tree made it hard to see. Plus, the road was super steep, so all I could really see was up, with a little moonlight peeking through the trees. All of a sudden, though, we reach the end of it. The trees just open up, and we have come off of an incline to a flat field, and holy fuck, what a sight it was. It's the flat field with tall prairie grass on either side, probably 2 to 3 feet high and pretty uniform. The path we were on splits the large clearing we are in down the center and leads through the grass to a cul-de-sac with 3 buildings. 2 look like they are farmhouses, with 1 barnish building. They are wood, and while they may have been painted at one point, it looked like they had mostly weathered and stripped by time. I see this and I am done. I want to leave. But of course, some of my friends say that we have to check out these buildings. At this point, I finally put down my foot, as do the 2 other girls and one of our guy friends, who decide this is enough for him. So the 3 guys who want to go to the buildings tell us just to wait there. And while we don't want to be in this field, out in the open, we decided we just can't leave them like that. At this point, we've turned off our flashlights that we had in our hands because the moonlight is so strong. The 3 of them take off down the little path, and the 4 of us who remain stand together, bitching about how stupid our friends are and making small talk. None of us say it, but we're all looking to the grass every now and then, worried something is going to jump out. It's just so creepy, this abandoned little settlement. It feels like our friends are gone forever. We see them get to a building and go inside. It was unlocked, I guess. We can see the flicker of their flashlights, lights in the windows. And I remember feeling so tense. It was like watching a horror movie in real life in VR. After maybe 10 minutes of this, we see our guy friends coming towards us, lightly jogging, looking afraid for the first time all night. "You idiots went inside," I said, pissed off at them. One of my friends just looks at us, and I'll never forget it. It was full of bikes. Just bikes. Chained to the walls. We didn't believe them. Kept waiting for them to say they were kidding, they were joking, but they insisted. Said it was like they were just storing a bunch of bikes there. Most of them smaller. They looked afraid, and as much as I didn't want to believe them, I did. They aren't the type of guys to pull a prank for this long. But then, we can all agree we need to get the fuck out of there, and we start down the hill, hurrying the best we can. All of a sudden, about halfway down the field, we can see a car's headlights down the hill. About where our cars are, we see them pass slowly, and we know someone is down there looking for us. Because it's so far off the beaten path, we figure it's one of 2 things. 1, the cops. The 2, the people who own this land, or these houses or something, and they're going to call the cops or murder us. we know that the road isn't that long, so they'll be turning around, circling back soon enough, and because our cars are there, they'll probably wait for us. We're all whispering about this as we pick up the pace, sprinting down the hill as fast as we can. Now, I'm not a good runner, but I was hauling ass, getting down as fast as I could, basically hurling over the fallen trees. Once we get down the hill, we don't see any headlights, but we know they can't be far away. Get in the fucking cars! One of our friends yell, and we're fumbling with the doors like a horror movie, just too nervous to get into the cars. We get in, and just as we start the car up, we see the headlights speeding down the road, a giant black truck roaring up behind us. The truck seemed larger than life, raised up off the ground. The whole thing was terrifying, but extra terrifying was that we couldn't see who was driving in the dark, and with the headlights blinding us. We peel out of there, total pedal to the metal. The truck is still following us, bearing down on us as our two cars race out of there. The car is also getting real close to us, threateningly close, almost like it was trying to run us off the road. We're all screaming, looking back at the truck, fighting for some distance. Once we get to the highway, we're switching lanes, trying to escape. Luckily, we were in sedans, so it was easier for us to weave in and out of cars. But this truck is still chasing us. We are in two different lanes. We don't want to get too separated from our friends. The passengers of both cars are texting back and forth, trying to make a plan. It took us about 15 minutes to lose the truck. I'm not sure if the distance was too much or if they turned around. But once we got to a big shopping center area, we ducked off the road and into a Sonic parking lot. We all sat in our cars for a little bit, watching to make sure we weren't going to get snuck up on before getting out of the car to get some food and talk. Everyone was pretty shaken up. It took us a while to settle down enough to head home. As much as we talked it over, we just couldn't figure out what had happened. Eventually, we all went home. During was a pretty silent car ride. Exhaustion and lingering fear, I guess, was still within us. We didn't talk about it again for a long time. And we never called the police, which honestly, as an adult now, I feel like we should have. I don't think about it often, only during the fall, really, but when I do think about it, I ask myself, who chased us? Why was that town abandoned? Who owned those bikes? And where are they now? When Walmart gets too friendly. I know to work at Walmart you have to be friendly. My mom has worked there, I have worked there, my dad currently works there. This guy, however, is just a little bit too friendly. Sometimes directed at my mom, sometimes directed at me. One particular instance I remember was the guy, I believe his name was Dennis, posting on one of my mother's Facebook statuses. She was shaking about it being a no-shave November, and he is in no way really close to our family at all. But he is a food enthusiast, just like my mom. I digress. He comments on it, "Oh, so I guess Jim, my dad, won't be getting any for a while." He also gives my mom shirts quite frequently, usually football shirts, but it's still pretty weird. As for my experience with him, I've caught him staring at my chest and butt on numerous occasions, but I'm usually with my parents, so I'm not worried. And the one that bothered me the most was my dad and I were talking, but I distinctly remember mentioning to my dad that I couldn't do whatever chore he had requested because I have a bad back due to a sledding accident when I was younger. He snickers and says, "So I take you're into bigger guys." I kind of frown, because that was highly inappropriate, but my dad didn't notice because he was talking to another cashier. I know it isn't as bad as some of these on here, but I am 19 years old, and he is at least in his late 40s. I have more stories of creepers, not Dennis, that I may share, but I just felt like getting this off my chest, and this seemed to be a place to do it. My roommate's boyfriend sexually assaulted me while I was asleep. This happened just about 2 weeks ago. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my longtime friend Mark. We've been friends since we were in diapers, and now we're both 22-year-old college students. We're regular guys. I play video games, hoot and holler at the woman, and I just consider myself a regular guy. Mark is the same, except that he's gay. But that is so completely irrelevant to who he is as a person. Anyways, on to the story. Last month, around November 3rd if I recall, Mike brought home this guy. He was really handsome, was clean-shaven, and was wearing the remnants of a business suit. He was our age, 25, Mark said. His name was Chad, and he was Mark's new love interest. I greeted Chad and welcomed him into her humble abode. Chad was great. He played Halo with me. We talked about cars. He offered to let me borrow some of his Call of Duty games when he was over the next time. Hell, even I was developing a crush on this guy. This went on for about 2 weeks. Chad would come over, Mark would cook him dinner, and then Chad would hang out with me. I was growing to like him. One night, I decided to turn in early because I had an exam the next morning. Chad and Mark stayed up to watch a movie, but I heard them go into Mark's bedroom, but I fell asleep soon after. It was probably like 3 hours later when I was woken up by the sound of my door clicking shut. Normally, I'm a very heavy sleeper, able to sleep through a very loud 5 a.m. construction with my windows open, but this woke me up. Groggy and slightly agitated, I squinted to see what made the sound. I could barely make out Chad. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and he was staring right at me, wide eyes, a look of fear on his face. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I was on alert. "What are you doing, Chad?" I sat up, turning on my light. Chad ironed his face into a normal look. "I thought I heard you call my name," he said in a whisper, as if he didn't want anyone to hear. He was acting really strange, and I felt creeped out. We stared at each other awkwardly for about 10 to 15 seconds. Then he apologized and left. The next morning, Chad acted as if everything was normal. I didn't sleep much after he left. I told Mark about what happened, and he didn't seem concerned. He just said that Chad was probably sleepwalking or dreaming. I wasn't convinced, but I soon forgot about it. 2 nights later, Chad was back over again. I was sick with a cold, so I took some NyQuil and went to bed after a few games of Assassin's Creed with Chad. It was 5:36 a.m. when I heard my door close, because I remember my eyes popping open and looking right at my alarm clock. But before I could process what was going on, I felt a hand clamp across my mouth, and another deliver a harsh blow against my Adam's apple. I started choking. It was Chad. He was on top of me. I was struggling to get him off. I threw him against the wall, which only subdued him for a second. I rolled onto the floor, but I couldn't speak because of my gagging from the hit to my throat. Chad pulled me down, wrestled me into submission, and began pulling on my boxer briefs. He kept shh me, telling me that it would be over soon, that he knew I was curious. I was frantic, and I was slow because of the NyQuil I consumed, but I managed to roll over just as Chad took off his pants, and I kicked him off of me. I was able to hit him in the balls, which made him shout in pain. Then Mark burst inside, saw Chad with his pants down, and me trying to catch my breath. The look on Mark's face is one that I'll never forget. Heartbroken, and anger, and confusion all at once. Chad stood up, said I tried to beat him, etc., but Mark went insane and almost beat the shit out of him. I pulled him off, and Mark gave Chad an ultimatum. Either he called the cops, or he gets the fuck out and doesn't come back. Chad left immediately, but Mark still called the cops and told them what happened. They came by, took our statements, and we got a call 2 days later that Chad was in custody and he confessed. Mark also let out a small detail. Chad did cocaine, which was in his system, when he was picked up. But Mark is recovering, but he still feels guilty, I think, for having it happen, you know? He keeps apologizing every time I see him, but shit happens. I'm just glad that Mark wasn't hurt by him. Alright, now that's my interesting story. I'll have to take a final exam now. Thanks, let's not meet.